Hey there, and welcome to Google's Innovation for the Nation 2013, a virtual summit. I'm Christopher Dorabek, anchor and managing editor of GovLoop's Dorabek Insider. It's an online program and blog that focuses on 6 words, helping government do its job better. And during our virtual summit today, we're also going to focus on those 6 words. We're going to help you do your job better, and we're going to do that by introducing you to a number of people and organizations, the government transformers. These are people and organizations that got tired of doing the same thing over and over again, and they're expecting different results. So they did something about it. They did things differently. During this presentation and throughout the day, if you have questions or comments, we want to hear from you. You can submit your questions here in the virtual conference center, or you can tweet us. We're using the hashtag IFTN2013. You know how to use Twitter, Innovation for the Nation 2013 or IFTN 2013, or you can tweet me at @CDorabek, and we will answer as many of those questions as we can. There will also be an opportunity to chat with our speakers. We'll tell you more about that later on. We have really a great day coming up for you. Later on today, we're going to talk about the future of technology in government. We've really moved beyond the cloud, no cloud debate. We're now talking about how you work multiple clouds. We're going to talk about that just ahead. We're also going to talk about mobile and security. We're going to talk about needles and haystacks and how you speed access to that mission critical knowledge that's out there. We're going to talk about working better together, collaboration maybe. We're a really cool case study about automating business processes in the cloud. And we're going to talk about how you can engage users with innovative web apps. We'll talk to an agency that did that. And finally, we'll finish up today talking about how you can equip your employees with the power of context. But let's start out the day by laying the framework. I don't have to tell you that there is a lot of change going on out there today. And yes, that includes government. Well, why? Where is all this disruption coming from? And what does it mean? And how do you get those sea legs so you can handle it? Well, Umesh Vemari is with Google Public Sector. He is going to talk about your agency powered by innovation. And Umesh, there is so much change going on, a lot of it coming from the private sector, coming from the commercial space, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's change all around us today. And it's very clear to us that the combination of mobility, on-demand information consumption, and large-scale services delivered at unprecedented scale is truly changing everything in our lives today. It's changing the way that we fundamentally interact with other people. It's changing the way in which we access information that we need to make important decisions. It's changing the way in which we visualize content. But really, it's creating a very personalized experience for us, a very personalized experience for how we share and consume information. And perhaps the best way to illustrate this is, let me tell a little story. About 4 months ago, I had the privilege of traveling to India with my family with the primary purpose of visiting family. We landed on that first day in India, and being a tourist in India, I wasn't terribly familiar with my surroundings. We immediately wanted to get out and see some of the sights, like India's presidential palace. So I turned on my phone, my mobile device. My device was immediately geolocated, immediately told me where I was. I was able to speak into my phone and simply say, India's presidential palace. I was presented with a map that showed me where I was relative to my destination. I was provided by turn-by-turn directions, so when we actually took the cab or the taxi from the hotel to the site, to our destination, we were very easily and clearly able to see where we were and understand our surroundings for safety and for other reasons. Once we reached our site, I was able to take pictures just like most tourists do, and had a Wi-Fi adapter that allowed me to sync high-res photographs from my camera to my phone. Once on my phone, as you had mentioned Twitter earlier, I was able to post to Twitter, post to Facebook and Google Plus and various sites, so friends and family could follow along in our journey. As well, I was able to use a Google map to create a geo-based itinerary and geotag the photos. So it was a very personalized experience for me. It was a very personalized experience for my family. But if you think about that, it's pretty amazing where we are in 2013. It's pretty amazing that we take for granted at this point the ability that we can do that and the innovation that's really happening in the consumer market. But it's not just what's happening in the consumer market today with technologies like this. We're seeing this innovation with government agencies every day now. They may be at different points in their respective journeys, but we see agencies like the General Services Administration who migrated 17,000 users to Google Apps and correctly identified in their own words that work is what you do. It's not a place that you go. We estimated from Google that the General Services Administration saved 93% on energy consumption or energy use alone. Those are real dollars. Those are real savings that can be reinvested for the benefit of users. We're seeing organizations like Amtrak, who recently released a real-time train tracker application. If you go to Amtrak's website, historically there's two functions that drove more activity than anything else, and those two functions were buying train tickets as well as the second function, which was checking train schedules. So now users have the ability from any device to be able to check the status of the 300 Amtrak trains and when they will actually arrive at the platform users care about. It saves users time, money, and stress, quite frankly. And then, of course, there's organizations like NGA and FEMA and Google Crisis Response, for that matter, that actively work providing information at the right time before, during, and after crises, major crises such as Superstorm Sandy a year ago and the ongoing crises in the Philippines. It's critical to people. It's critical to all of us as humans that we get the right information at the right time. It's critical that people are getting information from these agencies that allow them, in the case of what NGA and FEMA have been able to deliver, that they're able to see the status of their loved ones. They're able to see the status of their homes, of their most prized possessions. So clearly, there are major benefits that we can see from the adoption of consumer technology. There's significant advantage for government agencies, for businesses, for universities, and we're clearly seeing this transformation occur in this day, 2013, for all of these agencies.
And really paint a little bit of the framework that's around this, really a pretty disruptive time for a lot of agencies. They're trying to get their sea legs. Walk us through the framework for that disruption.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, with companies like Google, there is a massive amount of technology that's out there. To folks that look at Google, it must appear that things are constantly changing, and there is an obvious reason, because there is a lot of change. So what I'm going to do, what I'd like to do, is offer a very simplified view of how to maybe think about the offerings for Google. Think about the technologies that if you're a CIO, a CTO, a CEO, a program manager, an architect, a developer, a partner, an end user, anyone that deals with public sector programs, how to kind of wrap your head around and make sense of some of the technologies in a simplified way to think about the technology and how you can use it as a positive force for change, or as I call it, disruption, in your organization. But before we get to that, what I really want to talk about is some of the consumer trends from the consumer trends that we're seeing that are driving the change for that framework. So the first one, the consumer trends that we see, if we're going to borrow from consumer industry, is that we're moving from a mobile first to a mobile only society. And what I mean by that is, who would have thought 3 years ago, just 3 years ago, that smartphones and tablets would overtake PCs as the preferred computing device in our personal lives? In 2012, 70% of device sales, all device sales, were smartphones and tablets. That's pretty astonishing. And how we use those devices is perhaps even more astonishing. Today, 84% of traffic to Google Maps comes from a mobile device. We're very productive on these devices. How we think about these devices is actually quite a bit different than we have traditionally thought about laptops and PCs. First, they're much more personal. I don't think anyone out there would just simply hand their smartphone over to another person and say, do what you'd like with it. Second, they know where we are. Geolocation continues to be very important to deliver the right information to users. And third, they increasingly know where we need to be next and what we need to do next. This provides an astounding opportunity for us to deliver highly intelligent services to our end users. And because these highly intelligent services will be extremely personalized, I think what's important to keep in mind is today we know about phones and tablets, but we've also seen the introduction in consumer devices of things like Google Glass, of smart watches. So we're going to continue to see the form factors evolve and change, but what's critical is that we can deliver these intelligent services to end users. In order to deliver an intelligent service, or multiple services for that matter, what's critical is being able to deliver the right information in the context of the actual user. And so in order to do that, we think there's going to be a profound change, actually, for the way users interact with information and with each other. And we refer to this very simply as demand, suggest, and assist. So a simple way to think about this is, for all of us that are out there that travel quite a bit, I know I'm one of them, something we spend a lot of time, just like in the Amtrak example, a lot of time doing is actually checking the status of our flights. So let's take that as a simple example. If I were to be traveling today, one of the things I would do is I would check the status of my flight by typically doing one of two things. I would check my email for my confirmation, or I'd go do something like a Google search that could tell me the actual flight time and the scheduled flight time and the actual flight time. Well, what if we change the model? What if we get to the point where I can pick up my device and say, what time is my flight? And have the answer actually provided back to me. That's a very different problem to try to solve, right? It's very personalized to me. But what if we went beyond just answering the question of saying your original flight was scheduled at noon, but now it's actually scheduled because of a delay at 3 o'clock? We went beyond that and gave a suggestion to our users. We said, if your flight is at 3 o'clock, we suggest, given current traffic traditions, we suggest that you leave at 1 o'clock for that flight. But what if we went beyond suggestion and we actually said, let's assist that user. Let's look at actual traffic conditions. Let's look at the actual status of that flight and say, we want to give you a map, we want to give you turn-by-turn instructions, and we want to give you assistance on how to actually reach the airport. Very personalized, very much in the context, an answer provided in the context for me as a user, but allows us to not only answer questions, but anticipate what a user needs next and what question they might ask next. And that becomes increasingly important to the third trend of what's happening in consumer technology, and that is the profile of our users is changing profoundly. And the way our users interact with devices and information and other uses is changing very, very, very quickly. To put this in context, in 2012, the first generation of young people that were born after the internet graduated from college, about 2 million people that graduated from college. And by the time they were 10 years old, the majority of Americans actually already had a cell phone. So if you think about it, the expectations that they carry of their devices, that they carry of information, and of the systems is profoundly different than anything we've seen before. And we're just at the knee of the curve of this. It's only going to accelerate. They're social, they're mobile, they expect unbounded collaboration. There's an expectation of choice when it comes to technology and what the technology can do for them. But most importantly, they fundamentally do not understand that between school and their personal lives and work, the disconnect that they face when entering the job market, when using technology that is perhaps 5 to 10 to 15 years old versus what they've been using in colleges for the last 4 years, which is in the cloud, which is also what they've been using in their personal lives. So these are three significant trends that we see affecting this framework for disruption and the things that we all collectively have to deliver to our end users over the next few years.
It's interesting. Ro tweeted out that we're seeing that technology is often delineated as disruption that's bad, but what you're talking about is that this isn't necessarily bad. And in fact, you have a couple of case studies where folks are using this pretty effectively to get their jobs done in a pretty powerful way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to hear from a number of those folks today. It's really going to be I think it's going to be a very interesting day where we hear about changing the connotation of the word disruption for being something that is a bad thing to something that is fundamentally good for agencies and an organization. Disruption we can think about in two ways. One, disruption in the context of delivering powerful services to end user at a dramatically reduced cost. And two, we can think about it dramatically increasing the productivity of our users beyond what they experience today. But let me quickly frame a bit of what you're going to hear about today and put it in context around Google's offerings and what we offer to the market and how to wrap your hands around all the things that Google's doing and are available to public sector organizations. It all starts with our infrastructure, and Google's infrastructure obviously is known worldwide. But when we talk about our infrastructure, our aim for our infrastructure is really to provide high performance, low latency, and reliable services on top of this infrastructure, to provide all the compute infrastructure to reliably deliver applications that we build and deliver to end users and applications that you build as public sector organizations on our infrastructure to our end users ultimately. And there's really four pieces to that. There's the work that we do inside of our data centers worldwide, where we focus quite a bit on compute and storage. And we typically we operate our data centers at 50% more at 50% more efficiency than a typical data center that's out there. We spend a lot of time ensuring we're putting our resources against the compute in the data center. Second, there's the network backbone that Google actually runs to connect our data centers worldwide, high-speed backbone. Third, there's the edge points of presence. This is where we interface with other network operators, ISPs and others, that actually deliver content out to end users. And fourth, of course, there's global caches for high-value, popular content, YouTube content that's out there. So this is a worldwide infrastructure that everything we do is fundamentally built on top of this infrastructure. And then there's two ways to think about putting capability in the hands of your end users. First are applications that Google builds and delivers, and you're going to hear about some of these today from agencies like NOAA and NARA and others. And these are things like unified communications for email, document storage, collaboration, messaging, documents themselves. This also includes things like Google Maps, directly using Google Maps and putting that in the hands of your end user. Google Search, things like Google Map Coordinate. But fundamentally, you can think of these as applications that Google builds on top of our infrastructure and delivers directly to our end user that can be used on day one, and then that you can extend in the context of your enterprise, in the context of your agency, for any customizations required to satisfy your missions or your operational requirements. Beyond applications, there are platforms. It's only logical and it makes perfect sense. And we took a long look at this and said, if we are able, we Google are able to use our high-speed performant network and backbone to reliably deliver services to our end users, why couldn't our customers use the exact same infrastructure, the infrastructure that indexes the web, the infrastructure that provides search results back to user, the infrastructure that supports a massive amount of traffic, billions of searches, hours of YouTube uploads? Well, the short answer is you can't, and that's exactly what we've done. We've externalized our infrastructure and we've built platforms on top of that infrastructure so you as customers and you as partners in this overall transformation can build your applications directly on top of Google's infrastructure. So whether you're building web applications, looking for a smarter mechanism for storage, looking to integrate geospatial imagery and mapping capability into your applications, looking to do big data analysis, we have platforms that are available for you to build and extend applications and deliver them to your end users. Of course, if we are building applications and making them available with you as a partner to your end user, and you are building your own mission applications to support your operational requirements, there have to be mechanisms to distribute those applications, both in a web experience and a mobile experience out to your end users. So there's marketplaces that we support. Marketplaces such as the Enterprise Private Play channel to distribute mobile applications, as well as the Chrome Web Store that gives you managed access for your users to applications.
It's interesting because there are folks using these tools in different ways, and in fact, David Brown has sent in a question that said, this is a different framework for government where they're used to holding everything, and now they're handing it off to somebody, stuff that it can be pretty critical to them getting their jobs done. And that does create a level of disruption, almost uncomfort, doesn't it?
It does, and everyone has their own level of tolerance, I would say, for that. And there's nothing wrong with that, meaning that there are certain applications that we would all acknowledge are going to make sense to continue to be on-premise applications for a government customer. If we're talking about classified missions in the Department of Defense and those types of missions, certainly that's going to be there, and that's the traditional business model. But what we are increasingly seeing is to enable users to collaborate across a worldwide footprint in a much more effective way with information. There are certainly a strong and ever-increasing number of use cases that lend themselves to being able to run those applications in the cloud, as we're talking about here. But I think the takeaway from this is to recognize that some of those enterprises build directly, some companies like Google can provide, but at the end, the enterprise, the end customer has control over all of those assets. It's their domains, it's their applications, it's their data, it's their information, and they completely manage those environments. We can run the infrastructure for it, but I think that we'll hear more about that today from some of the companies we talked to.
not
So
only has control, but there's some requirements that you're just not you're not abdicating responsibility. You still have to have a
absolutely.
lot of involvement.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's why I keep using the word partnership throughout this discussion. It really is a partnership to make sure that what companies like Google are actually providing to our customers are, I mean, they're there to satisfy the requirements. They're there to satisfy the operational need, the mission need of the user, with benefit around cost and with benefit around those characteristics that a customer actually needs. So you're absolutely right, Chris.
Uh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say, just to round out the picture, because we paused actually really at an interesting place kind of in this discussion, because if I were to talk about the applications that Google delivers, applications that partners and customers build on top of our infrastructure, and making those available across any end user device, whether it be iOS devices, Windows, obviously Android, Chrome, that really is Google's consumer story. There's no difference between that and Google's consumer story of what we're doing in the consumer marketplace. I think the real piece to this that makes the enterprise story really work with our customers and our partners is the work that Google's done around enterprise administration and management, both from APIs, so you can customize and build dashboards the way you need them to satisfy your administration requirements, but fundamentally being able to manage users, manage services, manage devices, and manage information, and putting the customer in control of all of that management, giving you the tools as the customer to be able to do that for your enterprise. So as you live in these hybrid environments with some of your components on-premise and some of your components running with Google, the ability to be able to manage that environment, services, users, devices, and information. And there's a significant investment that the company has made there.
We're going to be talking to Noah coming up in a couple minutes, and they're really in this place where it's no longer a cloud or no cloud decision. They're working to manage multiple clouds, and that almost seems to be the place where a lot of federal agencies are. They've moved beyond whether they're going to use the cloud. It's a question of how they pull all those pieces together.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think so there's no doubt that government agencies will be there for quite some time, because again, there are going to be requirements that are going to have different levels of tolerance within each agency. But I think the thing that's critical is we have to look at the ecosystem as a whole. We have to look at the government agencies, whether it be the procurement departments all the way out to the end users, so those who are actually doing the federal procurements all the way out. We have to look at the systems integrator community. We need to look at kind of this new class or new breed of smaller companies that are focused on deployments in the cloud. And we need to look at the cloud service providers. There's a fundamental disruption to the business model that has already occurred to some extent, but it's going to continue to occur. I mean, we've seen certainly in federal government contracting that for these types of initiatives, the idea of a firm set of hard requirements in 8 to 10-year contracts to deliver that, to do custom systems development to deliver those requirements is going to shrink. It's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and the ability to use consumer-based technology to satisfy a portion of those requirements is growing. We can call that the cloud, or we can call that something else, but the reality is the influence of consumer technology has certainly made its way into the federal government. And so working with companies like Google, working with companies like Amazon, working with a number of companies that are out there is going to be the reality for many of these federal agencies. But I think an important piece of this is understanding that the ecosystem is still there. The systems integrators still have a strong role in that ecosystem. The smaller partners still have a strong role in that. But we're finding that the roles are changing a bit, right? And that's just the reality and the nature of a changing marketplace.
Umesh, we're running out of time, but I want to ask one last question, and that is, this is still what you've been talking about is still pretty disruptive to a government space that's been doing things one way for a very long time. What do you say to those folks that just say government is not ready for this?
Well, I would say one of the most powerful things is I would probably look at it and say, there are already government agencies doing this. There are a significant number of lessons to be learned. A number of them will speak today, a number of them who are using other cloud service providers. there are a number of agencies that have looked at it in the context of how do we deliver capability to the users and manage our own risk. Because at the end of the day, I translate the government's not ready for this as a risk management or a risk tolerance question. So I would encourage those that have those types of views to reach out, actively reach out to other government agencies like you've heard from today, because I think one of the most powerful things you can do is learn from those who have similar missions, learn from those who have similar requirements to what you're looking at, and understand how they've taken the journey. Not everyone's at the same place in this journey of transformation or disruption, Chris, as you've called it, but they're all at different points. But there's a significant amount of lessons learned out there. I agree with your previous statement. It's not a matter of are government agencies moving to the cloud? Are they going to or are they not going to? We've already seen the evidence that government agencies have moved. There is a large number of end users who are there, and so there are no shortage of lessons learned that are out there from existing government agencies.
And at least in my experience, it's not the cost factor that is a driver now. It's really the agility. People have missions they have to accomplish, and this allows them to do that in a much more holistic, really effective way.
Yeah, budgets are squeezed. There's a significant amount of pressure of how to innovate and deliver new capability with shrinking budgets. Yeah. So from my perspective, something has to give in that equation, right? The model of hundreds of millions of dollars to fund custom-built systems and programs, that, as I said before, that has to shrink. This downward pressure, this pressure around budgets is forcing government agencies to think about things that are fundamentally more disruptive. And I'll sort of close back to the 2 points. Disruptive in the sense that we can get more capability for much lower cost and significantly less O&M costs specifically is number one. Or two, we can fundamentally and radically change the productivity of our end users, and we can measure the cost of that productivity to our agency, allowing us to do quite a bit more with less investment.
Umesh Vermare, he is with Google, and a reminder that if we didn't answer your question, if I somehow didn't get to it or didn't see it, Umesh is going to be hanging out, well, not technically a hangout, you're going to be chatting with folks in our virtual, I have to be careful of terminology now, it's in the virtual conference center, and you can ask your question directly, chat it right in there. So just to let you know, we have some great sessions ahead. Later on, we're going to talk about needles and haystacks, and we're going to talk about how you can speed access to that mission critical knowledge that we all have but sometimes can't find. We're going to talk about that later on. We're also going to talk about mobile and security. I can't imagine that's an issue out there. Coming up in just a couple minutes right here, we're going to talk about the government of the future, technology in government in the future. As we've been talking about, we're moving beyond that cloud, no cloud debate. We're talking about how you do multiple clouds and what can you do in the cloud. We're going to talk with Noah just coming up ahead. One final reminder, if you miss any of our sessions today, they're all going to be available on demand, if you will, on the Google Federal YouTube page. And if you've registered, we'll send out the link to you so you can find it nice and easy. Come back and join us. We're going to talk about technology and the government of the future. That's just ahead. Thank you, Umesh.
Thank you.